Okay, well, thank you so much for joining Signet Education tonight. My name is Alison Mulbro, not Sheila. I am the principal admissions consultant at Signet Education, and I am delighted to be talking with you tonight about writing your perfect college essay. Just to give you a little bit of background into who I am, I started working in college admissions back in the year 2003. I worked in undergraduate admissions at Washington University in St. Louis. I was there for 12 years, recruiting students, reading applications. Each year, I probably read between 850 and 1,000 college applications each year. And of course, the best part of reading any application, as I predict any college admissions officer will tell you, is the essay, which is why I'm so excited to be talking with you about college essays tonight. After I worked in admissions, I then spent 7 years working as a college counselor at a private independent school, helping students in many ways, but of course, also working in conjunction with the English department at that school on students' essays. So I've been with Signet for almost 5 or 6 months now. And so I'm really excited to really help our students with Signet, or just students in general, with their process of communicating who they are through their college applications. And a key component of that is the college essay. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen here. Give you a little view. Oh, hopefully, hang on just one second. Okay. I want to make sure I got it into slideshow mode there. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Letting a few more people in. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? A thumbs up or anything like that? Yep. Okay. Well, here we are talking about writing your perfect college essay. Thank you. First thing is, please do not be intimidated for the students. This is your story. It is not a recounting of your grades or your scores or a specific activity. It is not a place where you feel like you need to prove yourself through a number or anything like that. It's simply a way for a college admissions officer to find out who you are, and doing this in a very genuine way, sharing a story that you already have. And you have many stories, let's be honest. So part of the challenge is figuring out which story you want to tell, and us being strategic about selecting the story you want to communicate. First of all, we want to think about the objective of the essay. A great essay rather, does 3 things really well. The first thing is it gives admissions officers a better sense of who you are. In the application, a lot of people spend time obsessing about numbers, right? Whether that be their GPA or a test score or how many activities they have. I certainly believe that it's quality over quantity, but those are things that tend to stress people out because they're very measurable. The essay really gives the admissions officer a well-rounded view of who you are. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a real person to join their college campus, not a number, not a statistic. They're looking for a real person. So the essay really helps you become a well-rounded person to them in the 11, 12 pages that they view when they read your application on their computers. The essay also confirms that you're not a robot, that you can speak for yourself, that you have a voice. And of course, it also shows to some degree your writing ability. This is not a research paper. This is not a literary analysis, but they are looking for your ability to communicate, your ability to write. Admissions officers are not sitting there like an English teacher. They don't have a red pen. They're not trying to find little mistakes or anything like that. But they, of course, want to read an essay that is well written, that communicates very clearly what the student is trying to say. So what is the Common App essay? Before I jump into these 7 points, let me highlight for some who may not know, what is the Common Application? The Common Application is an application that is accepted by over 1,000 colleges and universities in the United States. It is what most students will use to apply to college in the US. The advantage is obviously you fill out one application and then the student is able to submit it to multiple colleges, therefore saving them time in the admissions process. Some colleges may have additional supplemental essays, but focusing right now on the main personal statement essay, which is the Common App essay. It's not a very long essay. It's about 650 words at its maximum. I tell students to aim for somewhere between 550 and 650 words in general. So the Common Application essay, these 7 points that are outlined on this slide, which is a lot, kind of show what the Common App essay could be or what it's supposed to be. Obviously, it's not going to be all 7 of these things, but what is it supposed to do? It's supposed to share your story. Perhaps it's going to recount a time that you faced a challenge, a setback, a failure, how you handled that, how you grew from that. Maybe you're going to reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief that either you held or someone else held. How did you go about doing that? Why was that important to you? You could describe a problem that you have solved or one that you would like to solve. Some students take this in a very academic way or a social sciences way. Those can be really interesting if that's something that the student is excited to share. It might discuss an accomplishment, an event, a realization that sparked a period of personal growth or a new understanding of the student or other people around them. It might describe a topic, an idea, or a concept that the student just finds so engaging that they lose all track of time. Something that really encompasses their mind and something they're excited to think about, and can really exhibit a passion, perhaps in that way. And the Common Application prompt does give you the option for topic of your choice. So literally anything you want it to be. We'll talk a little bit more about these essay prompts specifically from the Common Application, but really the topic of your choice is just that indication that this is freedom, right? We don't really care what you write about. We want to know who you are. We want to hear your story, whatever topic, whatever direction that might take you. Okay, so the narrative. This is a personal narrative. It has to have an arc. It has to tell a story. The most effective essays really combine a storytelling component and also a lot of perhaps self-reflection. That's when you really get deep into who the student is. So at its most simple, the arc of the narrative, something happened. It affected you personally. And afterwards, you changed somehow. You grew. Something happened that really affected you. And of course, you were different at the outset. Colleges are focused on your high school years. So they don't really want a story that necessarily starts when you were a young child. They really, if the student wants to tell a story that stretches across a decade, colleges prefer that the bulk of the essay, the majority of that real estate, that 650 words that you have, is spent in a recent time frame. Okay, they want to know what has happened to you recently, even if it started long ago, but really focusing on that current time frame is an important thing that a lot of students need to, I think, remember as they go through this process. We all have really cute stories of things that happened or things that we did when we were young, but we want to make sure that we're bringing the college admissions officer up to the present. Because of course, colleges are trying to extrapolate from your entire application, from your essay, who you're going to be on their college campus. So even if this really great, awesome, cute thing happened to you when you were 10 or 11 years old, that's fine. But colleges are much more interested in present day. How has this affected you recently? Who are you now? And then extrapolating, who are you going to be on my college campus? All right, plan of attack. Whether you are a procrastinator or not, a last minute all-nighter just is not going to serve you well in the college admissions process. Admissions officers are going to read these essays quickly, but that doesn't mean you are going to write it quickly. You want to make sure that you come up with a plan for yourself. I love using a calendar. Okay, here's my deadline. My deadline is January 15th. I want to submit my application no later than January 10th. Therefore, I need to back up at least, I would say, 3 weeks or more to make sure that I have enough time to work on this college essay, because life gets in the way, right? We have finals at school, we have homework, we have all these other things, we have family obligations, we have holidays, we have trips. We want to make sure that the student has plenty of time to work on this essay. I would say a minimum of 3 weeks. We want to make sure they have time to work on this. Many essays we work on over the span of months as well, simply because that way the student has time to work on it, walk away, and come back. But we'll talk about that more. Think about how you, the student, works best. Are you a person who, yes, wants kind of that big push at the end where we're going to spend hours and hours in the days before we submit? Or are you a person who likes the slow and steady approach where you really feel like you have that essay in a really good place a week before you, or weeks before you want to submit the application, and you're just doing minor tweaks and, making sure that it's ready? Are you a person who needs, preliminary deadlines? Are you a person who needs accountability? Are you a person where perhaps your parent nagging at you constantly over the holidays? Have you finished that essay? Have you finished that essay? Is that just going to cause tension in the household and a lot of stress? Do you need someone, whether it be me or somebody else, helping you, hold you accountable, so you're making sure you're hitting some preliminary deadlines along the way? And who do you trust to keep you on track? Maybe you do have a great relationship, whether it be a working relationship with a parent or a sibling or a cousin or somebody like that who can keep you on track. That is absolutely fine, whether it's a professional like me or someone in your life. I would just say, make sure that you have that person there to encourage you, keep you going, give you feedback, but of course, hold you accountable to make sure you're not trying to do this all at the last minute. All right. Suggested essay plan. Number 1, brainstorm. We'll talk about this a lot more. Don't worry, we'll go into a lot of these steps. The second step after brainstorming is the most fun, right? Coming up with ideas, seeing where they go. Exploratory writing is also a lot of freedom, okay? Seeing which ideas lead in good directions. We'll talk about drafting a thesis, creating an outline, then writing that long first draft. And I do say long, I don't want anybody to worry about a word limit at that point. Then you're revisiting. Okay, is this essay actually about what I thought I wanted it to be about? And then, if necessary, tweaking and rewriting and adjusting that thesis. Of course, having time to revisit for clarity, flow. Is it well written? Is it easy to read? That communication piece, does that come across? You want to have time for outside readers and editors to give you their feedback, have time to make those additional revisions, and then, of course, the final proofreading stage. So this is not a one or done. This is why we want time to make sure we're really crafting something that's going to serve the student well. I do consider the essay an opportunity to share who you are with that college's admissions office. It hopefully shouldn't be seen as a burden. Oh, I got to write this thing. Some students may feel that way if they don't enjoy writing, but hopefully even the students who maybe writing isn't their favorite thing, I hope they can see this as an opportunity to communicate clearly who they are, share what they want to share with that college admissions office. All right, so let's kind of focus on each of these steps. Brainstorming. It's an active, ongoing process. It doesn't need to be rushed in most cases. A brainstorm is really kind of a piece of your life. So you want to be writing down ideas, even the ideas that you're like, I don't know if that's a great one. Sift your brainstorms and pick a favorite. I want to back up though a little bit and say that sometimes as much as sometimes I want parents to really distance themselves from their students' essay writing process, there are some reasons for that, which we'll talk about in a minute. I do think that sometimes parents can be very helpful at different points in the brainstorming process, because sometimes where students get stuck is they're thinking, nothing I do is that remarkable. Nothing I do is that unique or interesting. It's just what I do. It's what I do every day. And sometimes it does take an adult or, a different perspective to say, actually, this thing about you, or this thing that you do, or this quality about you actually is very distinctive, actually is rather unique. Sometimes the teenagers, particularly one who does, maybe naturally feel very humble, might need that adult who knows them well to kind of speak up and suggest topic ideas. Hey, have you ever thought about writing about this? That's one of the things that I think is really remarkable about you. So I do think parents, an adult in their life, can really assist a student sometimes in the brainstorming process, particularly if the student is having trouble coming up with what could I even say? It doesn't sound particularly remarkable to me because I do it all the time. An adult sometimes can help them grasp onto maybe the more unique part of who they are, the quality they want to communicate. Okay. So as you're sifting through your brainstorms, pick a few favorites. And then I want a student to brainstorm for scenes and details. Okay, scenes and details. These are real examples of what you want this essay to be about. A quality, a story, a scene. We'll talk a little bit more about this. Okay, so the brainstorming exercises, and we'll continue on, are important. Don't back away from them. I would encourage, if there are parents on this call, have the students do brainstorming exercises first. And if they're really stuck, that's when you can, chime in and see if you can offer your perspective. So one brainstorming activity that I have students do is write down 3 to 6 roles that you play in your life. That could be a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a leader, I'm a dancer, I'm a musician, I'm a dedicated public servant, any of these roles. And then under each role, we want the student to write down maybe 2 actual events or objects, something that's very kind of tangible that exemplify that role. And then as you're writing down those examples, kind of just see where it takes you. An example of sometimes to get a student started, I might use an example from my life. When I was a teenager, I had been studying ballet. So I was a dancer. Okay. And thinking about my experiences as a dancer, I did kind of have an experience at a particular dance class that I was at, where I witnessed a student in front of me receive a correction from the teacher, the dance instructor. And the student in front of me kind of rolled her eyes or bristled or made some type of noise. And the teacher stopped everybody and said, no, when I give you a correction, your response should be, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to make me better. And even though this wasn't said specifically to me, it made a big impact in my life in the fact that I really remembered that. I had a hard time at first in my brain wrapping my mind around that when someone gave me a correction or pointed out that I made a mistake, that my response was supposed to be, thank you. I didn't like making mistakes. I didn't want anyone to point out that I had done something wrong. But the fact that this teacher pointed that out, I really took that in. And it did eventually, it took a while, kind of create a paradigm shift in my mind where I realized perfection perhaps isn't the goal, or at least it's not an obtainable goal. Instead, I should thank someone, right, for trying to make me better, for investing in me. So that's just an example. It may not ring true to the student, but that's an example of a time where it was a role that I played and then something happened. There was a real example, real story there and I was changed because of it. Again, thinking down to that arc of the narrative. Okay. All right, the Common App prompts. Again, this is the common application accepted by 1,000 colleges and universities in the United States. They give you personal statement essay prompts to choose from. Make these essay prompts work for you, do not work for them. Okay. As I said, I spent 12 years as a college admissions officer reading hundreds, 1,000 applications each year. If you ask me right now what prompt number 4 is on the Common App, I have no idea. Colleges, the individual colleges did not write these prompts. They don't care, frankly, which prompt you answer. They want to hear your story. They want to hear the story you want to tell them. So they really do not care if you answer prompt 2 or prompt 4 or prompt 6 or do topic of your choice. It does not matter to them. So use the Common App essay prompts as merely starting points for brainstorming. Do not feel married to a particular prompt that you feel like you have to fit your story into answering that question. The colleges, again, don't care about those specific prompts. They care about the story you want them to tell. Now, I will say that the opposite is true for supplemental essays. What are supplemental essays? So supplemental essays is an essay that is specifically requested by a specific college. It might be as simple as, why do you want to attend Boston University? Okay, what makes you most excited about attending Boston University? In that case, that college did write that specific essay prompt. They want you to answer their question. These supplemental essays are in addition to the general common application personal statement essay. So you would write the personal statement essay that would go to all the colleges to which you're applying. And then if a college that you're applying to has a supplemental essay question, you will write that essay in addition. The supplemental essays are typically shorter. They are typically 250, 350 words, somewhere around that. Some may be a little longer, some may be a little shorter. But in those cases, the supplemental essays, they really do care that you answer their specific question. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. Common application, personal statement, really, it doesn't matter which prompt you answer, doesn't matter at all. But for a supplemental essay, that is a specific essay prompt written by that specific college. And then in that case, they do care if you specifically answer their question. Okay. Next step, after you've done some brainstorming, coming up with real ideas, is this exploratory writing stage. Try to tell the story without really consciously shaping it. For some students, if they're really stuck at this point, I kind of say, well, have somebody ask you the question, what happened? And almost do a voice memo on your phone, record yourself telling the story. Sometimes that's a great way to just explore, and then you can type up what you said. Explore all your good ideas, even the ones that you're like, oh, that may not be the best. Just see where it takes you. It might take you in an interesting direction that you didn't expect. Exploring scenes can often be useful. Some people like to start their college essay by setting a scene, putting the reader in the moment with them. That's always a good idea to explore. Write some exposition, right? Of course, explaining what happened, explain what's in the scenes. And where you are excited to write can sometimes steer where you're supposed to go. Like it says, go towards the heat. Yeah, you want to write an essay that you find really interesting and exciting, where you have tons of things to say. If you don't have much to say and you don't find it particularly interesting, nobody else will find it interesting either. You have to be excited about this essay with many things to say. And then we, of course, will talk about making sure it fits the word limit. So working thesis. So after you've done kind of some exploratory writing, then come back and be like, okay, what do I actually want this essay to be about? When colleges read your college admissions essay, when an admissions officer, these are real people, read your college admissions essay, they are probably going to write up, I don't know, maybe 3 to 6 or 7 words that what they learned about you from that essay. That's going to be their note, right? That they comment on about the essay. So at its heart, you need to know what this essay is about. You need to try to steer your reader into, okay, here's what you're going to take away from my essay. So that really would be your working thesis. Okay. What am I going to write about? Please, if you can, try to distill this down to one sentence because we want clarity. Okay. Sometimes essays end up trying to go a bunch of different directions. Sometimes what we have to do in our revision process is really narrow it. Okay, what is this essay about? That is your working thesis, and that's what we want you to try to, follow. That said, at this stage, your working thesis is very much a work in progress. You may figure out throughout this process that your essay is actually about something different, and that's okay. But we do like to have a thesis from which to work from, just so you have that clarity. What do I want this essay to be about? What do I want this college's admissions officer to learn about me when they read this essay? A rough outline, particularly some students really enjoy outlining, others really enjoy the exploratory writing phase, but either way, it is nice to kind of map this out for yourself. Where is the shape of your story? Okay. Make sure that you know what each paragraph is actually about. Okay. I'm going to set a scene at the beginning, and then I'm really going to break down, the 2 major takeaways or the 2 ways that I was changed from this experience. And then we want to make sure that there is some type of conclusion. Okay. Now, this is not necessarily a 5-paragraph essay that you're writing for school, right? It's not a literary analysis paper, but it is a personal narrative. So we want to make sure that there's a conclusion where the admissions officer who's reading your essay really understands at the end, okay, this is the takeaway. This is what I've learned about this student from this essay. Now the long first draft. Take out your outline, look at your working thesis, and start writing. And go deep. Lean towards that heat. If you've got some really interesting things to say in paragraph 1, but you're worried it's going to get too long, I don't care. Keep writing. There's going to be good stuff in there. Okay. Even if we have to shrink it down later, I tell so many of the seniors I'm working with right now, they're drafting and they're thinking, oh no, I'm way over the word limit. That doesn't scare me at all. Okay. We have time to condense it. We have time to tighten it up. We have time to look for our favorite parts and expand in those areas and condense in others. That is totally fine. So at this long first draft, long is just fine. You do not need to worry about the word limit. If you need to, you can revise your outline, especially if you can't come up with a good transition between the sections, and just give yourself the freedom to not be perfect. If you misspell a word here, or if this sentence doesn't, flow right, that's fine. We'll come back to phrasing. When I write, sometimes I get a favorite word, in my head, and I use that word over and over and over and over and over again in that essay, in that piece of writing. That's fine. Go back later and use a thesaurus, or go back later and try to think of another word for it. At this point, we just want to get all these ideas out there, even if that means it's not perfect. That is absolutely fine. All right, then we're going to reverse the outline, because remember, you kind of have an outline showing where you want the arc to go. After you've written this long first draft, then I encourage students to actually read each paragraph and then write a short summary for themselves about what each paragraph is actually about. And then take a step back and say, okay, does this summary of my paragraphs, does this actually make sense? Does this match the order? It doesn't have to be chronological, but does it make sense with this essay overall? If you need to adjust your outline, if you figure out, oh, what I was going to say second actually works better at the end or whatever, that's absolutely fine. I want them to write, have an outline, then start writing, then go back and summarize each paragraph for themselves to see if indeed that outline makes sense with the story they're trying to tell. All right. Revisiting your thesis, finding the core, and rewriting. I know we said this at the beginning, but this is not a one and done, right? This is a process. And if a student is willing to be resilient and dig into this process, there is so much good stuff that we can get through this revision process. So checking in with yourself. Are you still happy with what this essay is saying about you? If need be, in this writing of your draft, has your thesis actually changed? Okay, I thought this essay was going to be about this, but I thought it was going to be about, my experience playing basketball my junior year. But when I actually read this, I think this essay is actually about the way I found my leadership style. And basketball is just kind of the vehicle that got me there. What is this really about? So sometimes you have to, adjust that thesis just a bit to get there. You want to, especially if it's long at that point, say, what's the most important parts here? What are my favorite parts? What is really essential to what I'm trying to say? And if need be, we can condense the other parts, or if necessary, even cut sections. That's fine. And I do encourage students to experiment. Sometimes they may find in this, 600-word essay that they've drafted that there's actually a nugget in there somewhere in the middle of the third paragraph or something that's really interesting. Maybe you should think about expanding on that. And even if necessary, changing your thesis or changing the outline to see if that really takes you in a cool direction. Sometimes that means starting an entirely new document. Okay, I'm just going to take this part out and start maybe another long exploratory writing on this idea. It's good, I think, to experiment. I find that when a student feels pressed for a deadline, they're not as willing to experiment, right? Because they think, oh my gosh, I have to submit this, in a week or something like that. So this is another reason why I do encourage students to give themselves enough time for revision so they don't feel pressured. So they have that time to explore if necessary and kind of experiment. All right. I laugh because reading your essay out loud is something that sometimes students are very hesitant to do. Often when I'm working with a student, I will read it out loud to them. I consider it's like my public speaking exercise, right? So, I will be like, okay, I'm going to read your essay out loud. I want you to go and like highlight or mark areas where you're like, ooh, I don't know if I liked how that sounded, or oh, that was a little awkward. It didn't flow correctly. If something was too abrupt, if we needed like one more sentence to fully finish the thought. Of course, you want to rewrite, sections that maybe are confusing. It's not clear. It doesn't like strongly communicate what you're trying to say. You want it to flow. Check the transitions between paragraphs, of course. And well, before I move on to number 4, checking the transitions, I do think is important. I mentioned in my years, over a decade of reading applications in a highly selective college admissions office, that you read these applications pretty quickly. You're reading an entire application in, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes, the whole thing. So you're really on the first read. There are second readers and third readers, of course, and committee-based reading, things like that. But on that first read process, you're reading that essay one time, and you're going to read it quickly. And it actually is a bad sign if an admissions officer has to go back and reread your essay. That's usually, that means that they're confused. What? I don't get what is this. There were sections that weren't very, or the transition between paragraphs was so abrupt and the reader couldn't follow. So you actually, all right. I think my internet froze there for a minute. Hopefully I'm back and you guys can hear me. So basically, you don't want an admissions officer to have to reread your essay. That usually is a bad sign that something was unclear or they can't figure out what you're talking about. So you want to make sure it flows. You want the transitions between paragraphs to be smooth. The last point on this slide is be especially careful sections where you could accidentally be giving the wrong impression. there was, a joke that we always used to say in the admissions office was, for the essay, if you're funny, be funny in the essay. If you're not funny, this is not the time to try to be funny. I don't feel like many students are trying to go for humor necessarily, but there is a little bit of a risk if you're using a sarcastic tone or referring to yourself in the third person. You just could come across not the way you want to be taken. I was working with a student recently who was commenting about a really remarkable travel experience that she had. And the more we were working on it, and she was using some wonderful images and really talking about how this trip really transformed her, we realized that she hadn't really acknowledged the gratitude she had for this experience. We were worried that she was coming across as perhaps a bit arrogant, right? Maybe pretentious, not really acknowledging her gratitude for this experience, and that she recognized that not everyone had that privilege that she was able to have. So we did take a step back with her essay and think about, okay, where can we adjust your tone? Where can we acknowledge your gratitude for this experience? And I think we were able to do it in a way so therefore it came across as she was so appreciative of this amazing experience that she had that did really transform her and the ways in which that it did. But that was a good reminder that you do need to be careful about the tone, and just making sure you're not inadvertently giving off the wrong message. Okay, so outside readers and editors, this is where having someone read your essay for you can be so helpful, making sure that that tone is exactly what you want, making sure that they're getting out of it what you want them to get out of your essay. So I encourage you to show your revised essay to 2 outside editors. One person who knows you really well. Maybe that's a parent, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a close friend of yours. Maybe it's someone, an English teacher whom you know really well. It doesn't have to be an English teacher, any teacher who you feel like knows you really well. And then give it to somebody who perhaps doesn't know you as well, who's not going to come at this essay with any assumptions or preconceived notions about what you must have meant or what you're trying to say. Someone who's fresh, because that is going to mimic the college admissions officer's review. And that can sometimes be extremely, extremely helpful. Ask for feedback, of course, from your outside reviewers. Ask them to list maybe the 3 or 4, maybe even 5 qualities that they really got from this essay. What does this essay say about me? Hopefully they can, boil that down, because that's what the college admissions officer is going to do. And students, I have to very strongly encourage you to stand up for your voice in your essay. You do not have to accept these edits, this feedback. I want you to accept it, meaning listen to it, but that doesn't mean you have to necessarily make these changes that might be suggested. College admissions officers can tell when the good 17, 18-year-old stuff has been edited out of an essay. Colleges are looking for teenagers to join their freshman class. They're not looking for me. They're not looking for your parents. They're looking for well-spoken, right, well-written versions of teenagers, but they're looking for teenagers. So don't let your parents or any other adult proofread or edit out all the good 17, 18-year-old stuff out of your essay. It needs to sound like you. If you have worked this essay to death and it no longer sounds like you, go back, throw that version away, and go back to one of the earlier versions where you feel like your voice comes through. You do not have to accept all the edits, all the suggestions. If you disagree with it, you need to stay true to who you are, okay? That is very important. Being genuine in this admissions process is perhaps one of the most important things. You want this college admissions officer to really get a sense of who you are in a genuine way. not in an over-packaged, over-edited version of who you are. We want your narrative to come through. We want it to be compelling. We want it to be clear, but we still want it to sound like you. Final revisions. Oh, I've said this to so many of my seniors recently. Walk away. I need you to walk away for a day. Walk away from this essay. Come back and make sure you like these final edits, you like these final revisions a couple days later. So definitely burnout happens. And I think it's really good advice sometimes when you're feeling overwhelmed to say, okay, you're not allowed to look at this essay for the next 2 days. Walk away from it, come back. Reverse outline. Remember, that was that exercise where I said, okay, now read it and then write a sentence or two about what each paragraph is actually about. That's that reverse outline. Read it out loud, the whole essay, and revise until you're happy with it, making sure it sounds like you. Yes, you want to use spell checker and maybe, Grammarly or whatever. But again, there are some risks with that. So you want to make sure that indeed someone who has a pretty good command of grammar and the English language and all of that is proofreading your essay as well. As I said at the beginning, college admissions officers aren't reading this essay with a red pen. They're not trying to look for a mistake, right? But you don't want any mistakes to jump out, right? That doesn't always reflect very good on the writer. All right, my goodness, I have taken you through so many things. Let me check the time here. We have about 19, 20 minutes for questions, but I will certainly, I don't think the Q&A function is enabled, unfortunately, on this webinar or the chat, but on this slide, there is my email address, Alison with one L, ALISON @signeteducation.com. You're certainly welcome to reach out to me with any questions, and I will allow people, of course, to unmute if they want to in a moment here to ask any questions that they may have. But of course, the general Signet information, contact information there, www.signeteducation.com. Our general email address, info@signeteducation.com. And of course, the general phone number, 617-714-5262. So as you know, I have a great team with me at Signet Education that can help with many different things. So of course, you are always welcome to reach out to us to see what resources and just ways we might be able to help you. So I will stop the share at this moment so I can see everybody here. If you do have any questions, I am certainly around and available for the next 20 minutes or so. So if you're brave enough and would like to unmute and ask your question, I'm happy to answer that. If you would prefer to just send me an email, again, Alison, ALISON @signeteducation.com. You are certainly welcome to do that as well. So does anyone have a question?
I don't have a question, just one thank you. Great presentation, very helpful.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate that. Yeah, I have to say, I really love the work that I do. I'm very lucky that I get to do it, that I get to work with these awesome young people. If you're ever feeling depressed about the state of the world, become a college admissions application reader and you will get so much hope, because these students are truly amazing and they are doing some amazing things already, and they're going to go on to do fantastic things. So I really love what I do. So thank you so much for tuning in. Yeah. Anything else?
My question is, in your experience as an admissions reader, do you ever recall a time where a student was denied admittance because their essay was really poor, or did other factors contribute more to that?
Excellent question. When you do holistic college admissions, I like to say you're focusing on 5 things in the whole application. The high school transcript, right? Their grades and their rigor, the courses they chose to take within the context of what's offered at their high school. That's going to be the most important part of any application, right? We're trying to look at their academic preparation. Are they challenging themselves appropriately and doing well meeting that challenge? But we're also looking at extracurricular activities, what you're going to contribute outside the classroom to the community. We're looking at letters of recommendation, what teachers say about you. Are teachers excited to have the student in class, or have they really witnessed growth or academic curiosity? We like to see that too. How do they work with others? How do they learn? Maybe standardized test scores. You all probably know that test optional admissions is the majority of what colleges are doing right now. Many colleges are even test blind, meaning they won't consider standardized test scores. I mean by that SAT or ACT, even if submitted. Most colleges are test optional, where the student has the choice to submit scores or not. And there are a few that do require SAT or ACT even to this day. So those are kind of the four. And the last one is the essay. I sometimes say this to students, but it did happen a couple times in my admissions experience. Don't admit to anything illegal in your essay. When I say that, students usually laugh, like, well, of course I wouldn't do that. But sometimes people do. I remember there was a student who he was, again, I think going for humor. And he wrote about how he and his friends would drive around different neighborhoods in his town, and they would trespass basically on other people's yards and rearrange their holiday decorations into funny scenes. And I guess it was supposed to show how spontaneous and creative he was. I'm not exactly sure what he was going for, but it was one of those where, okay, is that showing a lot of maturity? Probably not. Trespassing, probably not a good thing to admit to. But more than that, it was us, I think, in our committee questioning his judgment in, this is what you wanted to write your essay on? This is what you wanted us to know? You had the opportunity to write about whatever you want, and this was the thing you wanted us to know about you. It was just a missed opportunity, and I didn't think it showed very good judgment. And so, yeah, that did give us pause in the admissions process. I honestly don't remember if that student was offered admission or not, but it didn't reflect very well. Not so much the Christmas, the holiday decoration thing, but more just that was what you chose to write about. I don't think that was a great choice, and that's what you really want us to know about you. Something that's very poorly written, usually these students have gotten it, proofread pretty well. I will say though, where you typically see the poor writing or the poor communication skills tends to be on those supplemental essays, because a student may spend a good amount of time on that personal statement, Common App essay, and then they remember, I got to write another 250 words about why I'm interested in the school, or why I want to major in, chemistry. And sometimes those are just really written very quickly and just submitted. And sometimes that's where the poorly written evidence kind of comes through, where you're thinking, ooh, that student did not take that essay prompt seriously, when honestly that the college might even consider that supplemental essay, I don't want to say to be more important than the personal statement, but very important, because that's a question that they were actually asking that they created. Some supplemental essays are very straightforward. Why do you want to major in what you want to major in, and why do you want to come to our school? Others are more creative. University of Chicago is either famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, for really crazy, wacky supplemental essay questions. Sometimes that's a great indicator if the student's a good fit there, right? If the student looks at those essay prompts and goes, oh man, these are awesome. I could totally write like 5 essays about this. Hey, this student might really be a great community fit for University of Chicago. They're a match there. If a student looks at those essay prompts and goes, these are the dumbest things I've ever heard of, why would I write an essay about any of these? That actually might be an indication that that student actually wouldn't be a great fit there. Not so much, I want to say from the college's perspective, or from the student's perspective. If that's the type of person they're looking for, the way that mind works, and that's not me, then maybe I need to look at a different, college to focus Some, I think it's Wake Forest does like a top 10 list. So pick a top 10 category and give us your top 10. Be creative, everything from, top 10 ice skating costumes to top 10 hot tea flavors to, anything, whatever the student's into is kind of an opportunity for that student to kind of show a different side of themselves. So some supplemental essays are very straightforward.
President
Others
Biden, of course, briefed this evening. He's in Bali for the G20 summit. News of the missile strike from Poland came in. That strike that hit there and leaves 2 dead inside Poland, just over the Ukrainian border. Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Bates, tonight. She's traveling with the president.
So yeah, you can see different things in different places. I think, who is it? Hendrix College in Arkansas. They do, what's your favorite candy? And I've seen students, overthink that forever. Like, what do Starburst say about me? All this stuff. Sometimes they can come up with something cute, and sometimes I have to be like, yeah, I think we're overthinking this. I think that school, if you're admitted, actually sends you that candy bar. Like, so if you love Three Musketeers, they're going to try to send you a Three Musketeers bar if they offer you admission. Like, sometimes it's just as simple as that. You don't need to write an amazing, profound essay about your love for chocolate, although you might be. Any other questions? If you need to go, please feel free. I know it's a busy season for sure. All right. Thank you. If I don't get a chance to say that to each person individually, thank you. But yes, if you'd like to stay on, if you have any more questions, happy to do that. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I will say good night to everyone. Thank you so very much for joining me this evening, and best wishes to everyone who is writing or will be writing college essays in the future. We are definitely here and happy to help. Feel free to reach out. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.